we're going to talk today about the brave new world of higher ed digital transformation. And I like to frame any discussion in education in the context of the learning crisis that we're facing globally. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, the world was experiencing a learning and skills crisis. Nearly 4 out of 10 children aged 10 could not read or understand a simple text. That's the reality globally. And the pandemic obviously exacerbated this crisis by bringing significant disruption to education systems, and in particular to learning and to schooling. It is estimated that between February 2020 and February 2022, education systems were closed for full-time for in-school learning for about 141 days. What this means is that in some parts of the world, like South Asia or Latin America, it was actually twice this time. And today, nearly 7 out of 10 children are experiencing what we call learning poverty. This is a significant factor affecting higher education these days, because these students that are coming out of a system that's disrupted are the ones going through higher ed, in particular in developing countries, in emerging markets. And we have today panelists that are familiar with these realities, and also what it means to work in low-income environments where maybe the tuition paid by the student, it's around $100 per month, which is a very different reality, maybe from what we will hear from Matthew when we talk about Stanford, for instance. So we have a very diverse panel. Digital transformation was also a reality pre-pandemic. I mean, even before the COVID-19 pandemic, students were digital natives that wanted to experience in their daily interaction with education institutions something similar to the experiences they had in other aspects of their life, whether it's transportation, digital services, or banking. This means that with the COVID-19 pandemic, most institutions were able to transition effectively to remote learning, and this enabled to continue operations to ensure business continuity for many institutions. But we're now in a post-pandemic world where we need to address the issue of the learning crisis. Going back to business as usual pre-pandemic will not help solve some of the issues like the learning crisis. And digital transformation has become a key theme. There's a need for new models that will accelerate digital transformation, that will bring education to new levels in terms of learning outcomes and employability. And digital transformation is also about the student experience. It's about enhancing that student experience across different moments of truth that shape up student satisfaction with their institutions. And more importantly, operational efficiency can also be significantly enhanced by digital transformation. It's about process automation. It's about transitioning from legacy to state-of-the-art IT architectures. I mean, it's a whole agenda for higher education institutions. So without further ado, I'm going to kick off today's discussion with a question first for Matthew and then to Leo, about the role of universities in a society where technology is playing a very significant role and content is becoming to some extent a commodity. Over to you, Matthew.
Thank you so much, Alejandro, and thank you all for being here, especially at the end of the day in this slightly stuffy room when there's beautiful sun shining in San Diego outside, and wonderful to be with my colleagues here. So I would approach this from like a kind of jobs to be done framework. I think that might resonate with those of you who've got the business school background. And research universities like Stanford have 4 jobs to be done. And I would say in each of those cases, there's value that is shifting from some legacy operation to some future-oriented operation. So the 4 jobs to be done, and this comes from Yaroslav Pelikan, great scholar of history, studied higher education. It's teaching and learning, yes, which you started with, Alejandro, but it's also the creation of knowledge. It is the dissemination of knowledge, like scholarly communications, journals, and it is the preservation of knowledge, like what happens in great libraries. And I think in each of those cases, there is kind of a new value that is being created in each of them. So I would say starting in teaching and learning, which is where you started, the value to me is shifting to learning communities, to networks, to questions of belonging and care. It's going to focus on what is uniquely human. That is going to be the thing that is uncommoditized by the technology. By definition, it cannot be commoditized by the technology. I would say in the space of the creation of knowledge, universities provide a unique platform for accelerating discovery and collaboration with tech that is neutral. It's non-competitive. We did an event at Stanford recently, on educational AI. We had OpenAI and Google sitting next to each other. They can't do that in very many other spaces, but that is key for accelerating open science. And I think it's key for the creation of Silicon Valley and for the future of Silicon Valley and the ecosystem like it. In the dissemination of knowledge, I think you see more open science happening, like preprint servers, like Archive, took off in the biomedical and life sciences during the pandemic when we just could not wait for the peer review process to happen. Of course, there's still great value and necessity in peer review. It's just happening after something has already been published. And like that to me is how that ecosystem is evolving. In a world of lots of misinformation and disinformation, we don't need less trust, though. We need more trust, and I think we need to reimagine how peer review works. And then last is the preservation of knowledge in libraries. Like, how many of you have used some platform before that writes you an email that says, we're shutting down the service, you have to delete, we're going to delete all of your information, download it all right now or otherwise it's all going to be gone. Academic libraries don't do that. We keep stuff forever. And there's not very many other institutions left. Like, I got one from Shutterfly last week saying, all your photos will be deleted. Take your photos now. During the pandemic, we were able to turn on access to all the digitized books that Google digitized, because there was a copy that was created called HathiTrust that was housed at the University of Michigan that wisely kept a nonprofit university-owned copy of every book digitized. And during the pandemic, this dark archive was able to be turned on. And we were able to give access worldwide to all the books that were inaccessible in physical libraries. They became available in digital libraries. So that to me is a model for all the functions, all the jobs to be done in higher education. There is some new value that we can create in the future that will protect us for the long term.
Oh, thanks, Matthew. Very insightful. And obviously you bring the experience of an R1 leading research university in the US. Leo comes from Mexico. Obviously, Aliat Universidades focuses on affordability and really serving a significant number of low-income students. How would you respond to this question, Leo? I'm sure it's going to take a little bit of a different spin.
Yeah, let me spice it up. I think content and technology are enablers, are tools. They're not the objective. The objective is how do you develop your students to their full potential. And you require knowledge, you require content, you require, and technology helps, but the function, talking about, in a business case, the function that you're trying to maximize is the full development of your students. And in that sense, today content, yes, it's being commoditized in the sense that it's democratized, today it's freely available. Some universities like Stanford do have a role on developing and innovating in creating new content and knowledge, and that's fantastic. From our perspective, really the art comes from how do you transform that content into knowledge and that knowledge into understanding. And it goes beyond semantics. It's how do you provide and how do you develop in your students the critical ability not just to trust the content that you're developing, is to be able to be critical about how it makes sense for your life, for your, your profession, for your community, for you as a citizen. So universities have to transcend what it was the purview before of the university about creating knowledge being the core to be able to develop your students to be full, human beings to the full potential, and both technology and content do not diminish because they're free today, that free in content in the sense, and technologies allow you to do and to provide more access. What they do, in my view, is they enhance that purpose to be able to democratize education, reach further, but never to lose sight that the real purpose of the university is to really develop people rather than just stay at the content as if that was the end in the core element of the university.
Oh, thanks, Leo. Meaning, purpose, and full potential, definitely key elements of a university experience. Let me turn it over to Irina, Agustin, and Narine. I'd love for you three to go a little bit into the details of what are the trends that are helping accelerate digital transformation. Irina, over to you.
Sure. I'm going to keep it actually pretty simple from an anecdotal perspective. I think digital transformation can lead to better outcomes. I'll give you a very simple anecdote. In class, we build virtual classrooms. We add teaching and learning tools to Zoom and to other video conferencing platforms. But even if you look at Zoom and all of the systems that we used during the pandemic, we polled our customers, and is a particular community college that put all of their gen ed classes on Zoom, on class. And we asked, well, how did it go? How were the outcomes? And they said we had way fewer withdraws, almost no fails. In an average sized class, you'll usually have a few Ds, a few Cs, 1 D, 1 C, and the rest were A's and B's. And that was one anecdote, but very representative of what we saw across a number of not just our customers, but we saw it kind of across the board, that when you put certain aspects of the higher ed experience into a digital format, into an online format, into a hybrid format, you actually get more engagement, you can get better outcomes, and I think at the end of the day, students are going to vote with their feet, and they're going to go where they're getting better outcomes, and where they're going to get, ultimately the job, the whatever outcome even after the fact that they're after. So for us, that is what we see as our North Star, and we think it's the biggest trend. Can you drive a better outcome? We think digital tools can help.
No, thanks, Irina, and obviously the experience of class is extremely relevant here. Agustin, what are your views?
Well, I think there are 3 big items pushing digital transformation in universities. One is obviously operational efficiencies. We're subject to, especially the ones that, in the for-profit sector with no public funding, we have to be very efficient operationally to be able to sustain $100, $120 tuition. So that's a huge challenge. And technology there plays a fantastic role in helping us achieve that. Secondly, we have obviously to increase the quality of the teaching or the learning experience, right? We have these kids that come with this huge deficit of knowledge, math, reading comprehension. It's really, and we face very high attrition rates in the first year of college. And the only way we can engage them, retain them, give them tutorials, etc., is through technology. There's no other way you can do that in a massive, scalable way, right? So that's another thing that's really pushing us to engage and embrace technology in all possible ways. And then lastly, I think, UX, universities have to be student-centric. I mean, we owe ourselves to our students and our faculty, but especially our students, and their families that trust us in providing kids with social mobility. So if we don't enhance the experience, they will be abandoning education. So I think it's impossible to have a scalable, measurable UX without technology. So I think those 3 factors, Alejandro.
Oh, thanks for unpacking that. And we'll go back to these factors and go deeper into that. Narine, over to you.
Sure. Yeah, I think there is, this is the way I see it. It's like one of the most exciting times to be in education in history, potentially. We have quite a few things happening. We have great challenges ahead of us, which creates really great opportunities. And I think we should embrace it. And, sometimes like the fear can hold back, but I think we should really embrace the digital transformation. I think you mentioned like what were the trends post-pandemic that sort of drive this, right? So on one hand, we have extreme digital acceleration, right? Like if you think about so I was professor before starting InSpace, And I would fly to San Francisco because I like doing consulting work for startups and kind of really be engaged both on academia and industry. And so sometimes I would do my advising hours virtually, and that was so different. Like my colleagues would actually look at it as like so different, right? And today, most of my colleagues, the same people, are doing most of their advising on campus programs virtually. And so like the culture and perception of the digital technology completely changed. And students now expect more. For them, it's actually shocking if you don't have an alternative to like meeting in person. Like, this all just became normalized for all of us. Now, the other thing that happened, of course, is OpenAI, and you're all hearing so much about it in this conference and before. I was actually one of the beta users of GPT technology like 2.5 years ago when it came out, and sort of having PhD in machine learning, that's sort of my area, so it gets me excited. And it's interesting how far it has come and what we can do today. But again, so like this new technology really challenges us to think a lot about how we do assessments, how do we approach learning altogether, and kind of leaning back to some folks here, so Matthew's point, I think we're going from knowledge economy to skills-based economy, soft skills-based economy, where students, the collaboration, the teamwork, that becomes the center of learning. That's what we need to teach our students, because that's a lot of this, AI and other things can help with sort of direct contribution to knowledge. And we have been creating knowledge for so long. So knowledge transfer is no longer what we do at universities. It's really creating knowledge together. So going back to sort of what do we need to do this successfully is creating technology that really accelerates that instead of becoming the barrier. Because oftentimes people really just follow what's available to them, right? Like if you have the wrong buttons to click, you're probably going to go there. And I think sort of like creating those, and that's why at InSpace we're really just focusing on how do we create that human connection for students to collaborate, to work together, to create knowledge together instead of just sort of just giving them content to work with. And the other thing I want to sort of say, like, we have this extreme trends happening post-pandemic, the AI trending and sort of digital transformation, and really just realizing all the gaps that we had in digital adoption that we didn't really knew before pandemic. And sort of, but at the same time, we can sort of embrace this change or kind of fight it. And I think I want to sort of share one example. So in 1960s, artificial intelligence was trending, right? It was really going great. And like at that time, of course, there was like this one individual artificial neuron called perceptron. And I know this is going to get technical for just 1 second, just hang in there with me. And so what happened, actually, in 1969, Minsky and they published a paper. And in this paper, they just outlined that this one perceptron neuron, single layer, cannot solve the XOR problem. Now, those sort of in the math, basically, if you can't do XOR, it's not complete, so it's not the full story. So very quickly, it was disqualified. Basically, it just can't do things. And what happened is all the research and SF funding stopped. So AI basically took a decade pause, right? And sort of like looking back, kind of where we are today, right? Sort of like, do we ban it? Do we work with it? Do we figure out how to accelerate us using all of this technology, but keeping the humans at the center of it? I think that's the critical piece.
No, thanks, Narine, and we'll go back to GPT and AI. I think it's an exciting discussion, but let's now try to go a little bit deeper into the different elements of digital transformation. And one area, and I'm going to start with Matthew, is really academic innovation. How can digital transformation support academic innovation?
So let me try to define academic innovation, because it may sound like an oxymoron to some of you. Academic innovation, and I wrote this out because it's not easy, it's the idea that we need to apply to our own institutions the same evidence-based scientific methods for discovery and improvement that we use in our labs and teach in our classrooms. And it's not about one tool or another. I don't think it's even about digital transformation, because not all innovations require tech or that much tech. Tech is often the catalyst, but it's not the rationale from my perspective. The rationale for me is like, how do we better achieve our goals as educational and as research institutions? It's about changing culture, changing expectations, changing the if it ain't broke, don't fix it problem, which many of us have. It's about an institutional growth mindset rather than an institutional fixed mindset. And most important, I think, academic innovation is the idea to drive transformation from within higher education. So if we are going to secure our own future, we can't be obsessed with the disruptions from the outside and the attacks from the outside. Like, we need to figure out within our institutions, what are we going to adopt? How are we going to adapt, to your question, Narine, to the evolving needs of our society? And how can we organize ourselves to better meet those needs for the future?
Oh, thanks, Matthew. Agustin, student experience.
I think that's essential, no? One of the things we've learned with digital transformation is that when you start measuring what your students feel, the way they relate to the university, from administrative matters like enrollment, like getting the schedules in place, like choosing classes and so forth, from even the learning experience sometimes, but being able to monitor that, it's absolutely essential, and it makes a difference. I think when we started implementing in our different campuses, service from traditional based service to web-based for everything, and tutor enrollment went up, satisfaction went up. So I think it's absolutely essential to focus not only the academic experience, but all the services related around the university.
Oh, thank you. And Leo, what about operational efficiency?
Yeah, one thing that we are obsessed is how do we create an architecture in the university, from the academic programs, the organization, and the systems, that captures all of the information to be able to improve constantly. So whether it being in the way that you process a transaction, to the way that you understand the level of learning that a student has achieved versus an actual goal that we have. And one of the things that even Agustin mentioned, if we think about the segment that we are addressing, is people that can pay $100, $150 per month. So we have to be extremely efficient in the way that we deliver those courses, and how do you do that with quality? How can you provide a price point that they can afford, with the quality that they so badly need? And actually, it requires even more support and tutoring and mentoring than traditional, top universities. Because we're talking about students that come with all of the inconveniences, for putting it that way very diplomatically, that comes from studying in the public sector in a country like Mexico. And you have to be able to remediate those. So the only way that you can do this is with scale, and be very obsessed in the way that you structure it in a way that you develop it once with excellent quality, but it can be deployed to, in our case, over 50,000 students. And that is supported by systems, that is supported by technology, but the objective at the end of the day is to be able to get to the student with the best quality possible, at a price point and with an experience that will keep them at the university. Capturing all of the data is fundamental. We have done it. For example, you can improve retention rates, desertion rates at the university by being able to capture the information that will enable you to predict who's going to desert and give you the tools to be able to retain them. You can improve conversion rates in the commercial process, so be able to target the students that are most likely to convert and stay at the university. And you can improve quality of education by targeting and understanding how do you teach better and how our students learn. And the only way you can do it is by capturing all of this information.
Thanks, Leo. Very exciting model, and obviously operational efficiency focuses on back office operations, but there's the academic side of things as well. How do you increase commonalities? How do you standardize the curriculum? how do you create content factory approaches that will enable you to reutilize content across different modalities of provision. I mean, it's an exciting topic. We'll definitely have a chance to continue the dialogue on that. But let's turn it over now to Matthew, Irina, and Narine. I'd love to hear your views about the role of large technology companies like Microsoft, Amazon, Google in the higher education space. Let's start with Matthew.
So I would say we should be concerned about the way that AI technology changes the power dynamics in the relationship between corporate research labs and university labs for two reasons. The data, which is locked up, they don't explain how the training happens. It's basically a black box. And the compute, which is millions of dollars of compute to train a model. So Narine, maybe you can, if you've done industry work, and you switch sides to industry, that's like a little bit of a signal to us about like those power dynamics playing out. And I think this, even at places like Stanford, we have to be concerned about how we relate to do like an industry academic partnership. And the model of public-private partnerships, I think, is probably going to have to evolve to adapt to this like changing, ecosystem. I think we have a secret weapon though, inside traditional higher education, which is that with respect to industry competition, we are the Switzerland. I mentioned OpenAI and Google sitting next to each other at an event that we did, and I think we need to double down on open data, open science, open educational resources. That's the thing that we can do that the market cannot do. And I think that provides a very powerful platform for collaboration that is really important to lift all boats, to make the whole industry work more productively. And there's a role to play for institutions in order to bring together that neutral collaborative space that will otherwise probably not be created.
Thanks, Matthew, for pointing to some potential areas of concern. It's a very valid point, obviously coming from the perspective of a leading university like Stanford. Irina, what are your views?
I would say it's first and foremost, it's the infrastructure that we can actually drive all of these efficiencies that we've been talking about, right? I mean, if it wasn't for Google, we wouldn't have all of K-12 on, pretty much free infrastructure for both LMS and video conferencing and so many other assets. And in higher ed, you look at, frankly, even where are the labs getting all of their compute and so on? It is these players, right? You're not really running this on-prem. You're partnering with these big guys to be able to do what you need to do. So, whether we like it or not, these are the powerhouses and the infrastructure that we need to drive the innovation that actually meets the consumer, because they answer to the consumer. At the end of the day, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, they are going to prioritize what will ultimately drive a market. Academia can be removed. Higher ed can be less removed, because ultimately, obviously, students vote with their feet. But we have to recognize that they are the ones who are going to bridge the gap with what is going to be useful, and that is actually why I think it would never have been a higher ed on its own to release anything even close to ChatGPT, right? Partially because they would have never been able to invest at that level, and partially because the incentives are not such that they are in industry. And that's I'm not here to judge if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but they're the ones who are pushing the limits. And I think it's true as well in autonomous vehicles. I think it's true in space exploration. I mean, it's true in military technology. It kind of goes down the list, at least in the United States.
No, thanks, Irina. And obviously that foundational role of large technology companies is very critical. And Narine, over to you for some views on this as well.
Yeah, this is a really interesting topic, right? So one I'm very passionate about, actually. So, actually years ago, I started this thing. It was called Machine Learning for All, and it really just started like a mailing list. And it was like, that was the moment when I was like, this is going to change people's lives, and we need people to understand what this is about. We need to democratize this knowledge of what is this AI thing? Is it biased? Is it not biased? Is it on our side or not? And all of those questions, and I think, Matthew, you have a very good point there. Like, if you have large players with tons of data and they have access to it, they're training their models, what does it mean for the rest of us? And, you know, I was concerned about that as well. But what happened recently is actually very interesting, right? So before, we were all training our models, but we at InSpace had very limited data. And when I was a data science program at Champlain College, we had very limited data as well. So the models can only do so well. But then what happened now is like something like OpenAI, and there's others like Google has the BERT models, and all of those models came along, and they're open source. So now we actually get access to that data as indirectly through the trained models. So actually, some researchers at Stanford, they reproduce the same functionality by literally using GPT-4 to train their models instead of having all of that, you know, manual entry and data points and all of that. That's very resource intensive. So in some ways, it feels like this. We'll have to wait and see how this plays out, right? But it's going to be interesting. But I think now everybody gets to play in that field in a way versus some of the bigger folks on the thing. But I think for me, what's really critical is the partnership between academia and industry. The only way we're going to get this right if we're working on this together and we have the tech resources, but also that institutional knowledge of what the learners really need and centering all of that effort around the student experience, around the advisor and teacher and professor experience, because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. And I think what's really interesting is if we just focus on that, I think we can get the rest of the pieces correct. And for us, it's always like, can we get the student experience right? Because they're the consumers of this, everything we do. And a lot of the newer generation, the expectations from technology are different. And we need to meet them where they are in sort of this unified way that's sort of not segmented so much and siloed.
Thanks, Narine. And obviously the topic of partnerships keeps emerging, and I'm going to give an opportunity to Irina and Leo to talk a little bit about the partnerships between EdTech, venture-backed companies and universities. Obviously, Irina, you can bring the perspective more of an EdTech play, and Leo can provide the perspective of a university. Over to you, Irina.
Yeah, in a nutshell, I think we can be agile. And being venture-backed means we can actually take our time to get to the right answer for the end user. And that end user might be administrator, that end user might be the provost, that end user might be the student. Sometimes they all want the same thing, oftentimes they do not. The benefit that I think we can bring to a partner is we can take our time and we can try a few different things, and you know, we don't have the kind of the burden of the public market weighing down on us to say, you know, any which move you try something innovative, God forbid you'll you know, disrupt yourself. I think it's, you know, incredibly brave of someone like I think we all saw Chegg today partnered with OpenAI. Incredibly exciting, but incredibly rare to just go out and say, you know, I'm going to disrupt myself. And I think, you know, you're going to obviously see, you have to worry about stock prices and so on. The benefit of the venture-backed is you're shielded from that.
Leo.
Yeah, I think the evolution of these partnerships will also be different market by market. I mean, I can talk about what's happening in Latin America and Chile, in Mexico in particular, and I can tell you that there are 2,712 private universities of medium to small size that are not able to invest in technology. And either they will or they will disappear. So they will have to either join a network or buy services from an OPM or partner with somebody, or otherwise they will disappear. What shape, form this will take, it will trigger partnerships, licensing agreements, it will trigger a wave of M&A. That's something that we want to be one of the ones that consolidate this wave. But one thing that it is for sure is that we are seeing the tipping point of traditional universities going digital. And in doing it well, it is extremely expensive. The CapEx required is high. So small universities, I don't see any way they will be able to spend the tens of millions of dollars required to really be fully digital. So again, it will take the form of all of this, from partnerships to M&A to an integration to, OPM-like type of alliances. But certainly it won't remain the same, and it will change in the next couple of years.
Thanks, Leo. And I think that unbundling of the value chain is something that we're going to see more of, and obviously partnerships is the trend, and the possibility also to embed third-party content into universities' offerings. It's something we're starting to see in some of the emerging markets where we work, and it's probably going to become a little bit more of a trend, maybe that Netflix approach to education that some people are talking about. We are sort of coming towards the end of our session, but I want to give some panelists an opportunity to go deeper into the role of AI in education, and GPT obviously is in everybody's mind. I'm going to start with Agustin, Narine, and then Irina. So over to you, Agustin.
Thank you, Alejandro. I think it's going to be profound effect. It's going to be disruptive and long-lasting. We'll see, for instance, personalized teaching. We'll see an improvement in the learning experience because you know how your students are learning, where the difficult things are for them or not. We'll see much more efficient tutoring. For instance, in the online world, sometimes you don't respond to the questions from the students on real time. There's a lag because of time zone difference or what have you. That naturally will be done with AI tutoring because you have all the information on your courses, and it's going to be fairly easy to get them to replicate all the questions that students ask repeatedly. So, and it's also a boring job for the tutor, no? It's going to create cost savings, I believe, as well, for sure, some cost savings. And it may make education more inclusive because we will know, precisely how to teach depending on the student's deficit, needs, what have you,
No, thank you. That's obviously very, very, very important point. Let's hear from Narine and then Irina.
I think it's a really interesting time, and we're going to see a lot of more personalized learning and meeting students where they are and really helping them to achieve their goals in ways that fits their lifestyle best and like where they are in their journey. And I also think it's going to be interesting to kind of see how the partnership between industry and academia goes. I think for me, I want to see more educators in industry. I want to see the other direction. Like, I think that needs to happen, and we need to develop this together because it's new and it's different, but at the same time. So for example, actually like at InSpace, we partner with over 120 institutions, like colleges, and we really sort of, they're so open to like help to develop it together. So it fits perfectly into the applications and how it goes. And actually we have partnered with Southern New Hampshire University in a large strategic partnership to really together advance online learning, because bringing that connection, human element and collaboration and belonging to online learning is so important, especially as a lot of schools are going to build their own online programs and sort of creating that environment that's easier to bring student, emphasize the student experience and really like invest in that. And I think the only way to do this right is like when we do this in partnership together. And we'll also see a lot of filtering where like, like if we don't collaborate together, we're going to create features that are just not, relevant. So, I mean, there's just like very simple things like, how do we use, for example, things like AI to take the logistics out of the way and accelerate humans? So the advisors who are advising, they have a lot of, like, for example, we do this thing where we would summarize the conversation and have action items to follow up, so they don't have to scribble notes during the meetings, but they can actually just have shared notes with students to follow up and sort of really can focus on that human element and connection when they're in that meeting. So I think we're going to see a lot of really interesting acceleration in education in that space.
And with this futuristic note, I think we're going to give Irina an opportunity to wrap up this session. Irina, any final thoughts on AI and GPT?
So I'm just going to say one thing that is actually not digital transformation. It's going to go the opposite way. So I agree with everything everyone has said around the AI, the personalization, the just-in-time tutoring, the summary, all of it. I think where it actually becomes less digital is testing. How are you going to test that someone actually knows something? And I believe, probably crazy, but I believe we're going to go back to oral exams. And you're going to have to go up to the whiteboard, to the chalkboard, and actually write out the proof. You're going to have to give the oral exam for the history, et cetera, et cetera. Whether that's online or in person, it honestly doesn't matter. But how else are we going to test that you actually know something? We'll see if it happens, but I think that is the one place where AI will actually take us in the totally opposite direction, and perhaps that's actually positive for education moving forward.
Thanks, Irina. With these final remarks, let's give our panelists a big round of applause. And